So, my name is Haryasva, and is it on? Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Janavalabha Girivardhari Gopi Janavalabha Girivardhari Yashodanandana Brajajanaranjana Yashodanandana Brajajanaranjana Jamunatira Vanachari Jamunatira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Janavalabha Girivardhari Yashodanandana Brajajanaranjana Jamunatira Vanachari Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare Vishnu Paramahamsa Jakarcharya Astota Satyashri Shrimad His Divine Loving Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jai Vishnu Paramahamsa Jakarcharya Astota Satyashri Shrimad His Divine Loving Grace Srila Bhaktivedanta Saraswati Maharaj Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Haridasa Ki Jai. Pimsiko Śrī Kṛṣṇa Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Śrī Advaita Gadadhara Shivasi Gaura Ki Jai. Nitai Gaur Premanande. All glories to the simple devotees. All glories to the simple devotees. All glories to the simple devotees. All glories to the lotus feet of Sri Guru and Sri Gauranga. Jai Srila Prabhupada. So, my name is Haryasva. I'm from Philadelphia in the U.S. and I'm here this evening to discuss and to hear Srimad Bhagavad-gītā with you. And we're hearing from the 5th chapter, Karma Yoga, Action in Krishna Consciousness, text 16. So this is where we'll start. Turn to the verse. Jñānena tu tad ajñānam yeṣāṁ nāśitam ātmanaḥ teṣām āditya-vaj jñānam prakāśayati param jñānena tu tad ajñānam yeṣāṁ nāśitam ātmanaḥ teṣām āditya-vaj jñānam prakāśayati param jñānena tu tad ajñānam yeṣāṁ nāśitam ātmanaḥ teṣām āditya-vaj jñānam prakāśayati param jñānena tu tad ajñānam teṣām nāśitam ātmanaḥ āditya-vat jñānam prakāśayati param teṣām nāśitam ātmanaḥ prakāśayati jñānena tu tad ajñānam nescitam teṣām āditya-vat jñānam jñānena tu tad ajñānam yeṣāṁ nāśitam ātmanaḥ teṣām āditya-vat jñānam prakāśayati jñānena, by knowledge, to, but, tat, that, ajñānam, nescience, yeṣāṁ, whose, nāśitam, is destroyed, ātmanaḥ, of the living entity, teṣām, there, āditya-vat, like the rising sun, jñānam, knowledge, prakāśayati, discloses, param, Krishna consciousness. Translation and purport by His Divine Love and Grace Srila Prabhupada. When, however, one is enlightened with the knowledge by which nescience is destroyed, then his knowledge reveals everything, as the sun lights up everything in the daytime. We can repeat this one. When, however, one is enlightened with the knowledge by which nescience is destroyed. Then his knowledge reveals everything as the sun lights up everything in the daytime. Purport. Those who have forgotten Krishna must certainly be bewildered, but those who are in Krishna consciousness are not bewildered at all. It is stated in the Bhagavad-gītā, sarvaṁ jñāna-plavena, jñānāgniḥ, sarva-karmāṇi, and nahi jñānena sadṛśam. Knowledge is always highly esteemed. And what is that knowledge? Perfect knowledge is achieved when one surrenders unto Krishna. As is said in the 7th chapter, 19th verse, Bahunam jñānanam ante jñānavam mam prapadyate. After passing through many, many births, when one perfect in knowledge surrenders unto Krishna, or when one attains Krishna consciousness, then everything is revealed to him, as everything is revealed by the sun in the daytime. The living entity is bewildered in so many ways. For instance, when he unceremoniously thinks himself God, he actually falls into the last snare of nescience. If a living entity is God, then how can he become bewildered by nescience? Does God become bewildered by nescience? If so, then nescience, or Satan, is greater than God. Real knowledge can be obtained from a person who is in perfect Krishna consciousness. Therefore, one has to seek out such a bona fide spiritual master, and under him learn what Krishna consciousness is. For Krishna consciousness will certainly drive away all nescience, as the sun drives away darkness. Even though a person may be in full knowledge that he is not this body, but is transcendental to the body, he still may not be able to discriminate between the soul and the supersoul. However, he can know everything well if he cares to take shelter of the perfect, bona fide, of the bona fide Krishna conscious spiritual master. One can know God and one's relationship with God only when one actually meets a representative of God. A representative of God never claims that he is God, although he is paid all the respect ordinarily paid to God because he has knowledge of God. One has to learn the distinction between God and the living entity. Lord Śrī Kṛṣṇa therefore stated in the 2nd chapter, 2:12, that every living being is individual and that the Lord also is individual. They were all individuals in the past. They are individuals at present, and they will continue to be individuals in the future, even after liberation. At night we see everything as one in the darkness, but in day, when the sun is up, we see everything in its real identity. Identity with individuality and spiritual life is real knowledge. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Namane Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Vicharne Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschati Desatarine. So, here, Srila Prabhupada has been so kind. He's packed the purport with so many wonderful details. And as the verse starts, I see much better on my computer, but it's not working. So we'll do what we can. When, however, one is enlightened with knowledge by which nescience is destroyed, then his knowledge reveals everything, as the sun lights up everything in the daytime. So we have experience of the darkness. We have experience in the darkness. Sometimes you can't make out exactly what's there. You can't see a thing as it is. I remember as a young boy, they couldn't have anything in my room, on the door, hanging or anything like that. Because at night I would think there were so many different things in my room on the door. But as soon as someone came in and cut on the light, I could see a thing as it is. So that's what happens when we have perfect knowledge or Krishna consciousness. Here we're speaking of knowledge above the mundane sphere. Earlier in Bhagavad-gītā, Krishna explained to Arjuna that he spoke this imperishable science of yoga to the sun god, Vrindavan, and he spoke it to his son Manu, and Manu spoke it to Ikshvaku, and in that way the knowledge had been coming down since time immemorial. And the purport there, Srila Prabhupada said, this knowledge was given to the royal order, to the heads of all states, all planets. Specifically, they were given this knowledge to protect the citizens from the onslaught of bondage to lust. So you see, in a proper government arrangement, people are cared for, they're protected. And without a science like Krishna consciousness, where is the protection? We have to fight with the three modes of material nature. But all of us, at least myself, life throws so many challenges at us that sometimes we become perplexed. In this one body, we still have a mind which is so attracted to the objects of the senses. And we have the intelligence with its planning commission. But to speak of the fact that the false conception of self has us so fixed in the understanding that this is me. You bump me, you bruise me, you've hurt me. So within this one engagement in this body, there's so many things which is working against us. What to speak of the external things which are pulling at us constantly. So we find ourselves somewhat bewildered or perplexed. Arjuna earlier also became perplexed. When I speak of Bhagavad-gītā, I often ask people, let's join the conversation. Bhagavad-gītā has different sections, different facets, but there's a conversation taking place. This conversation is between Krishna and Arjuna. And it started off as just two friends. But because of the bewilderment, because of the perplexities in life, Arjuna was becoming extremely bewildered. And therefore, understanding the state of his affairs, he says, Karpanya dosho bahata sabhava prichchami tvam dharma samudaya cheta. He diagnosed his situation as one as a weakness of heart. He could understand it. He just wasn't seeing things properly. And in that condition, he says, Shishastiham sarvaṁ tvam param. He said, he wanted to stop the friendly talks. Now I'm your shishya, I'm your disciple. I want to be a soul surrendered unto you. Please instruct me. So Krishna did that. But all throughout the Bhagavad-gītā, in this conversation, we get to hear those questions of Arjuna. We get to hear exactly what Krishna wanted to tell him. So today, in this particular section of the Bhagavad-gītā, we're hearing how to come from under the nescience, the bewilderment. And this nescience is what the human form of life has granted us. Everywhere you see, there's bewilderment. But the Krishna consciousness movement is so unique because this knowledge that we're speaking of, perfect knowledge on its own will not be so easy to acquire. But Srila Prabhupada he's been so kind that not only did he give us the formula, but he gave us a sangha. He gave us a sangha in which we could come to the point of understanding and practicing. So you'll see here in this section of the Bhagavad-gītā, Krishna, Srila Prabhupada, there's several things. He says, and he's talking about being able to see things as they are. What is that knowledge? What is achieved when one surrenders unto Krishna, as said in the 7th chapter, Bahunam, Janmanam Ante, Ganavan Mam Prapayante. So, it's such a nice purport. I don't know how I'm going to do it. I don't have my computer's not here, but let's see, 719. Good. Srila Prabhupada spoke of this point, so I want to go there. After many, many births and deaths, he who is actually in knowledge surrenders unto me, knowing me to be the cause of all causes and all that is. Such a great soul is very rare. So the significant word that was used here is surrender. Often in the West, even when preaching, we don't like to use the word surrender. I'm a little crazy, a little bold, because I still use it. Because I think that our main business is to help to pull the conditioned soul out of this nescience, and therefore surrender is required. Without surrender, we won't get the experience of tasting the sweetness of being a servant of God. So although it may sound bitter in the beginning, surrender is necessary. And that surrender we're introduced to it. Just as Arjuna changed the trajectory of the relationship with Krishna from friends, he said, I'm your shishya, I'm a disciple, a soul surrendered unto you. Here it's explained that in order to acquire this knowledge, which is going to protect us, we need a spiritual master. Actually, in that same verse in the Bhagavad-gītā, Srila Prabhupada said, who is the man in perplexity? The man in perplexity is the man without a spiritual master. A person with a spiritual master is supposed to know everything. So the most essential part of pulling us out of nescience is we come to the understanding that we have to surrender to the spiritual master. Krishna told Arjuna, again, earlier in the Bhagavad-gītā, just try to learn the truth by approaching the spiritual master. Inquire from him submissively and render service unto him. Those self-realized souls will impart knowledge unto you because they have seen the truth. And then he says, and when you have thus learned the truth, you will know that all beings are but part of me, and that they are all in me, and that they are mine. So Krishna claims us. But that surrender has to take place. When we come to the point of acknowledging the spiritual master, then we approach him. And the spiritual master says, well, you need to refrain from these 4 sinful pillars. But then he gives us a gift. He said, but you need to chant. Take this mantra. Chant this mantra 16 rounds daily. And so, as we begin to take the gift of the spiritual master, then the efficacy of the process begins to take place. Just as the sages of Namni-Sharanya, they told Sutta, they said, Veta tvam samyatat sarvaṁ tatvatat-tanugrahat briyusniknasya shishasya garava guyum apyutam. They said, and because you are submissive, your spiritual masters have endowed you with all the favors bestowed upon a gentle and learned disciple. Now please, scientifically explain to us all that you've learned from them. Srila Prabhupada says, the secret to success in spiritual life is to get the genuine blessing of the spiritual master. All through our experience, we get the understanding that everything has to come through the grace of the spiritual master. Without the grace of the spiritual master, one cannot make any advancement. So this is important. And when we get that spiritual master, he teaches us how to do something. And that is surrender. And this surrender is what is discussed as far as wiping away the nescience, the darkness that has so covered us in our endeavors. So this verse, Bahunam Janmanam Ante, in the Purport, the living entity, while executing devotional service or transcendental rituals, after many, many births, may actually become situated in transcendental pure knowledge. That the Supreme Personality of Godhead is the ultimate goal of spiritual realization. In the beginning of spiritual realization, while one is trying to give up one's attachment to materialism, there is some leaning towards impersonalism. But when one is further advanced, he can understand that there are activities in the spiritual life, and that these activities constitute devotional service. Realizing this, he becomes attached to the Supreme Personality of Godhead and surrenders unto him. This is extremely important, because without the surrender, the lights don't come on. We get different gradations of different releases from the influences of material nature. But the human form of life is such a rare gift, as you hear. So when we get this human form of life, the onus is on us to make that inquiry. Who am I? Who's God? What's the purpose of life? And what's going to happen at the time of death? So we make that inquiry by surrendering to the process of Krishna consciousness. And as we surrender to the process, we taste the sweetness. All of us are looking for some taste. Therefore, degradation is engaged in the material world because it has some taste. There's some taste in drinking that harsh smelling and tasting liquor. There is some taste in eating dead animals. It's not my taste, but there's some taste there. But once we engage in Krishna consciousness, we develop that higher taste. And we develop, the consciousness begins to change. The process is so built, is so developed, that all one needs to do is associate with the devotees, then find the spiritual master. And once one surrenders unto him, then this human form of life and its real value becomes obtained by us. In this purport, Srila Prabhupada spoke so nicely about this process, but ultimately Prabhupada explained that we had to surrender. I just want to pull back up a little bit of what Srila Prabhupada said. Prabhupada says here that real knowledge can be obtained from a person who is in perfect Krishna consciousness. Therefore, one has to seek out a bona fide spiritual master, and under him, learn what Krishna consciousness is. For Krishna consciousness will certainly drive away all nescience, as the sun drives away darkness. Even though a person may be in full knowledge that he is not this body, but is transcendental to the body, he still may not be able to discriminate between the soul and the super soul. This is also very, very important, because without the relationship, everything becomes lost. The idea of merging into the Supreme or becoming God or whatever, there's so many combinations of this illusion. It may seem attractive, but what the cost is that we give up our relationship with Krishna. We have this minute independence. And as we go through the Bhagavad-gītā, we find out just how benevolent and loving Krishna is. He gives us this independence. We're free to serve Krishna, or we're free to try to find satisfaction in the senses and in the objects of the senses. And his love is so amazing that he's not afraid to give us this freedom. But he wants it. He wants us to turn around and say, yep, now you take it. I have this, but I want to offer this to you. You take it and you tell me what to do. Just as Arjuna met his perplexed moment. And in that moment of perplexity, Arjuna asked Krishna, please instruct me, tell me what to do. Arjuna had no desire to kill his grandfather, his cousins, his friends, no desire whatsoever. But Arjuna's desire changed because he had a desire to please Krishna. And as that desire changes, also the empowerment takes place. In the 12th chapter, in the 12th text of the 2nd chapter, Krishna told Arjuna, because Arjuna had asked a question about the sun god. Anyway, Krishna says, "Natvevaham jatunasam." He says, never was there a time when I did not exist, nor you, nor all these kings, nor in the future shall any of us cease to be. So not only was eternality there, but individuality. And without individuality, we lose the real essence of our being, of our relationship with Krishna. Jivasrubhaya Krishnari Nichadas. In our right situation, in our uncontaminated situation, we're an eternal servant of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. That's who we are. And that means he's a person, he's an individual, we're an individual. And so there's a relationship. But Krishna has such an affection for us. Not only is he speaking Bhagavad-gītā, not only does he send the spiritual master and explain the methodology in which we can bring about this change of consciousness, but then from within the heart, even if we're endeavoring on the path, but we're weak still, he says to show them special mercy. I, from within the heart, destroy with the shining lamp of knowledge that darkness born of ignorance. Again and again, he's coming. He's sending his representative. Why? This is love. This is affection. The real affection that we're looking for is being offered to us on a daily basis. The Supreme Lord is trying to let us hear. He's telling Arjuna constantly through the Gita, Takshvinu, just hear. So for ourselves, we have to hear. And Vrindavan is a different place, but most of us are put in an environment which is not so conducive for spiritual enlightenment. Our environment tells us you have individuality, you should enjoy. Constantly being bombarded with the idea of enjoying separately from the Supreme. But it doesn't work. It's a trick. It's another trick of the illusory energy. No matter how we endeavor, no matter how hard we try, it's like when you chew, in the West, when you chew gum, when you chew chewing gum, there's sweetness in it. But at the end, that sweetness is out, and you take it out. And sometimes as a young kid, you put it on your bedpost. And at other times, you say, well, let me chew that gum again. You take that useless gum, and you try to see, maybe there's some more sweetness there, but it's gone. It is past. Sensual Sensual happiness, sensual pleasure just does not work. Sense gratification and self-realization go nil together. Therefore, we have to take advantage. And as I said, in this conversation, we're being so bombarded by Krishna, the spiritual master. What to speak of the fact that Krishna is there as Chaitya Guru. As we wake up a little and we try and endeavor to find the self, then we find the self of the self, the Lord within the heart. We hear our mind, we hear our contaminated intelligence. When do we hear the Lord within the heart? So we have to endeavor, we work towards it. And that formula has been given again by Krishna. Krishna says, sarva-dharma parijyajya, just abandon all other dharmas and surrender to me. Well, is it working? Is it really working? So Radha and Krishna, they still work together. But Radharani, her mood is, you want them to have it, give it to them. You want them to have love of God, give it to them. Here's Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Radha and Krishna together. And what are they given? Love of God, the highest, Krishna Prema Padayate. And they're giving it to people who have no qualification. What is the likelihood of me sitting here speaking to you about Bhagavad-gītā? I mean, I'm just in awe. I have no qualification to speak about Bhagavad-gītā. My only qualification is that on the order of our spiritual master, I have to speak. And Krishna, towards the end of the Bhagavad-gītā, he has so many benedictions. He said that he who studies this sacred conversation of ours worships me by means of intelligence. And he who preaches the Bhagavad-gītā to the devotees, for him, pure devotional service is guaranteed. And at the end, he'll come back to me. So the nescience that is covering us, that uncovering that has to take place, it can only take place if we surrender to the process of Krishna consciousness. This process of Krishna consciousness is the gift of the spiritual master. It's the gift that keeps on giving. So, we're supposed to stop at 7. If there's any comments, any questions, you can do it at this time. Yes? Okay. Thank you so very much. All glories to Prabhupada.